Hey there, everybody. Welcome to Raw Parenting Unfiltered. I'm BJ Muir, your heart based coach, and I'm so glad that you're here with me. Whether you're here with me live right now or you're joining me on the replay, I'm so glad that we're together. Raw Parenting Unfiltered is my chance every week to answer your parenting questions. Live, raw, totally unfiltered. Just whatever we say right here, it's just between you, me, and whoever else is watching the video. So let's get to it. We're going to answer some questions tonight. I've got a bunch of questions that came in, but if you're here live, feel free to type something into the chat box. Maybe we'll get into some of that stuff as well. Well, when I'm thinking about this week, oh gosh, I've done a lot this week. We've had a really busy week. I've had a bunch of families. I've been coaching one-on-one and really enjoying my time there. Our kids are just in the full swing of all the things that happen in September. But I was thinking about how much time I spent in the bathroom this weekend. And you want to listen now, don't you? I was just doing a bathroom renovation. So we have a couple of bathrooms here, but one of them really needed to be renovated badly. Now, we didn't exactly have all this money sitting around here to go ahead and do this fancy renovation. And I've talked about it on this podcast before, where I looked at what needed to be done in this bathroom. Tile walls that needed to be painted because they were ugly, ugly tile. A ceiling that basically needed to be replaced, and I didn't think I had the spackling talent to handle the job. Some light fixtures, I knew I could handle that, and a bunch of other stuff that I just looked at. I was like, I don't know, and not knowing and feeling intimidated kept me from actually pursuing that for a long, long time. That bathroom stayed in bad shape for a long time. I'm going to pour myself some water while I'm telling you this story. And, oh, that's not the way that it should pour. So it sat there for a long time, totally unfinished. And I finally just looked at the end of the summer and was like, this needs to get done and I have to do it. And, I talked to ChatGPT to give me some advice on some of the different specific techniques, and talked with my wife and talked with a couple of other people who know what they're doing, and relied a little bit on my own background as a painter, and got to it. And now we've got a pretty much almost fully done bathroom at this point. I still have to do a little bit of trim work, and I have to hook up the sink, but otherwise everything's done in there. And I am really excited about it. And if I'm honest, I look and now and I go, what took so long? Why didn't I do this sooner? Why didn't I do this sooner? Fear. That's why I didn't do it sooner. Time, yes, there's a time element. Having 8 kids, being married, coaching families, teaching kids at school, that leads to a very packed calendar. Absolutely. But I could have made time for it too. And I definitely could have made time for it this past summer, earlier in the summer, or maybe even 2 summers ago. Maybe not 2 summers ago, 3 summers ago. I could have, though. Yeah, I could have totally done that. So I tell this story because I see fear keeping so many of us back in our parenting as well. We want to see change in our kids. Sometimes we recognize that we need to see change in us as well. But we don't do it, mostly because we're afraid. We're afraid we're going to fail. And if we don't try, we never failed. And somehow that feels better. So I want to encourage you tonight, don't be afraid to fail. Because if you fail, it means you tried. When you haven't failed, you probably haven't tried. And so don't be afraid to fail. All right. So let me take a look at some of these questions here, and we'll get right into it right now. And again, if you've got any questions, put them in the chat, and I'll take a look at those. And chat ones get higher priority than what I have right over here. So here we go. Excuse me. I remembered water this week. How do I help my 7-year-old handle explosive anger when he feels things didn't go his way? All right. If your kid struggles with explosive anger, where it feels like they go from 0 to 60 like that. And there's just no way to see it coming on. We need to start teaching kids how to read environments as much as we teach them to read their emotions. Here's what I mean. Many times I'll talk to parents about helping their kids navigate tricky emotions and big emotions. And I'll often tell them that one of the first things kids need to do is they need to start noticing their own body cues. I still think that's important for your child as well, but something else we're going to have to add in and layer into what your child needs. But let's talk for a minute just about noticing our bodies. Your bodies give body cues, body signals for what emotions you're feeling. And it's important for kids and adults to know what those signals are. A lot of times you can start that conversation off with kids by saying, "Hey, do you know how you know when your body is feeling upset, angry, frustrated, whatever the emotions that your child struggles with?" And they'll often say they don't because they genuinely don't. So flip the question then and say, well, do you know when I'm feeling angry? And you'll be surprised. They know exactly when you're feeling angry. And you ask them, well, what does my body do? And they'll tell you exactly what your body does, which is good for you to know because you can start reading your own body signals. And then share with your kid, if they don't know their own body cues, how you know when they're getting upset, angry, anxious, whatever the emotion is. That's an important skill. And then afterwards, expect them to not notice their body still. We're going to want to point it out. So the next time your child starts getting frustrated, you might say something like, "Ooh, I'm hearing you starting to growl and stomp. Are you feeling frustrated or angry right now?" Or, "Ooh, I think your body's trying to tell you something. Check out what you're doing with your hands." And what you're trying to do is drive your kids' attention to the body signals. From there, we can start helping a kid navigate the emotion a lot better because the sooner we catch the emotion, the smaller it is, the easier it is to navigate it. But for this 7-year old that we're talking about, this 7-year old is just getting explosively angry pretty quickly when things don't go his way. So you might be saying, in my kid too. And so there's no body signals because it happens too quickly. When the body signals are happening way too quickly because the anger is just coming on so quick, that's when we want to teach our children to notice environments where they struggle with more than just their body. Let me set you up with a little bit of an analogy. You could use this with your children and then help you apply it to your kids. Where I live, we have an intersection not too far from our house where there's unfortunately routinely, probably easily once a week, an accident at that intersection. The lights all it's got lights, the lights work just fine. It's the drivers and their habits and their behaviors. People run the red light there all the time. There's lots of people who need to make left-hand turns at that light. There's a lot going on in that intersection. The problem is people aren't doing their job when they get there, and it's literally costing lives, unfortunately. So when I approach that intersection, I'm very aware that I'm coming up to that intersection, and I pay much more attention to what's happening when I'm there so that I can navigate that intersection successfully. There we go. Successfully. There we go. It's hard. It's hard to say that word, but it's also hard to navigate that intersection because lots of people aren't doing their jobs the right way. That's what's happening with your kid too. There are certain areas on the road of their life that are fine. They can just drive, relax, enjoy the music. But there's other intersections and areas of the road in their lives that are like this intersection. It's a troublesome space for lots of reasons. We don't want to have to go around pointing fingers and blaming why it's that way. We just know this is tough. For some kids, it's homework. Homework is the bad intersection in their life. For other kids, it's bedtime. Bedtime is the bad intersection in their life. If you can name your kid's bad intersection, go ahead and put it in the chat box. I would be so interested to read in the comments down below what is some of the most common troublesome, tricky intersections in your children's lives. Because I think if you put that comment down there, you're going to start seeing other comments down there and going to say, oh, good, it's not just my kid. It's not just me. That helps so much when we can look at each other and say, yeah, me too. And so we want to teach our kids to drive carefully when they're in those environments. What does that practically look like? It looks like us pulling our kid aside before they go into those environments and saying things like, hey, so you're about to go out in the backyard and play in the sandbox. And you might remember the last time you were out there, you got into a big argument with your sister about whatever it was. So, what are you going to do if your sister wants to use that shovel that you want to use too? How are you going to handle it in that moment? You're raising your kid's awareness and you're giving that kid some strategies. Picture yourself back in the car, and now you're not driving the car. Your child is driving the car, and you're teaching them, they're in driver's ed. You're going to be talking to them. Hey, we're coming up to this intersection. Be careful. You want to make sure to look on the left-hand side. Where let's pause. Even though we got the green, I always wait 1 or 2 seconds just to make sure there's nobody just flying through here. You're doing that with your kid who's not driving now, who's going out to the backyard to play in the sandbox, who is about to start her math homework, who is about to play the video game that gets them all angry when they die too many times on a level. That's those moments. So we want to treat it almost like we're teaching our kid how to drive. And this is the tricky part of town. Once you start doing that, excuse me, you start raising your child's awareness to that moment. They start driving through that moment a whole lot more carefully. And in the process, they are more likely to succeed. There's one other element, though. Notice where you were in my analogy in the driver's ed course. You're in the car. I'm not saying you need to just always be in the situation hovering over your kid. No, don't hear me that way. But I am saying you want to be more present when these tricky situations are around. You want to be there because when you notice your kid's starting to get a little frustrated, upset, whatever it is, you can coach them over to you, talk them through it. Just like in that moment when you're going into that intersection and your kid's driving the car, that's not the moment you check your phone. That's the moment you really pay attention. Maybe later on you check your phone for a message you got, but you don't do it at the tricky parts when you're teaching your kid to drive. These are the tricky parts of life for our kids. These moments where they go from 0 to 60 with their emotions, and there is no body signal that comes on to warn us. If we can start helping them realize this is a tricky time, give them strategies to make it through those tricky times, and then they start having success, you'll start seeing things really turn around for your kid too. Thanks so much for asking that question. All right, I'm going to get a drink of water because I was coughing during that. Again, if you're here live with me, that's great. Good to see you. Put something in the comment section there, and I'll see if I can get to your question. But if you're watching on the replay and you have a question, obviously you're not going to put it in the comment section. I have a link down in the description that you can go ahead and click on. Just put your question in there, and I will use your question in one of these future live streams and give you an answer there. So go ahead and do that at any point during this replay. All right, here we go. Oh, this is a good one. It's about arguing and debating. Does anybody have a kid out there who you feel like this kid would make a great lawyer? Yeah, they just are really good at arguing. That's this question. All right. What do I do with a child who constantly argues, debates, and whines whenever I tell him to do something like a chore, go to bed, or anything else? It feels like a constant debate with him. So if you feel like you're constantly debating with your kid, that anytime you give an instruction, tell them to go to bed, put up some sort of a boundary, that you get a lot of whining, arguing, debating, then you need to start shifting how you approach this kid in your parenting. The good news is this child you have that you're debating with so much, that's arguing back and forth, is likely a very intelligent kid that you have. You're probably pretty impressed with how smart they are. I've even spoken to some parents who say, my kid can totally like out argue me and I get kind of run down, worn down by them. Yeah, these kids are often very intelligent and they oftentimes are not debating and whining, complaining and badgering because they're trying to mess up your day. In fact, I would suggest that no child wakes up in the morning and thinks, how can I mess up her day? How can I mess up his day? Oh, I can't wait to argue about bedtime tonight. No, they don't want this argument any more than you do. But something else deep in their heart is driving this forward, where they engage in this debate, this argument, this badgering, this whining, this complaining. And we need to see beyond the behavior into the heart so we can help the heart of your child move in the right direction. So let's start naming what's going on in the heart and naming what we want to see going on in the heart. And then I'm going to give you a few practical strategies to help you in this situation, because the truth is, this is a difficult situation. It's not going to get solved with a quick YouTube video in about 10 minutes with your kid. This is going to be a lifetime of working with your kid on the heart and you being consistent in the way you approach this, so that your child can grow and have a heart that's molded in the way that Jesus wants to mold it. The challenge you're going to face is feeling like there's a power struggle between you and your child. When we start getting into power struggles, when we start talking about our child trying to overpower us, we're oftentimes having the wrong conversation. Your child in this situation, who's debating, arguing, complaining, whining, badgering, is oftentimes struggling with something called demandingness. I know we don't like to think about it that way, but that's exactly what's going on in the heart. What we want to see happen in the heart is this development of two core heart qualities, and they stand in tension with each other. We want to see your child be content in all circumstances. Contentment is great. Gratitude goes with contentment. Those are great heart qualities there. But we also want to see them have ambition. We want children who have ambition, who have drive, and a get up and go, who want to achieve things in life. The problem is, when I'm too content, the scales between contentment and ambition tilt this way. And when I'm too content, I become apathetic. These are our, stereotypical 35, 40-year-olds sitting in the basement playing video games with no job, right? That's not going to be your kid. No, your kid's in the other direction, where they are too ambitious and it's leading to something we would call demandingness. The difference between ambition and demandingness is where they place value on relationship. Children are being ambitious, have goals for life, but one of their goals is developing relationships, and they recognize that relationships trump everything else, just like they do for Jesus. Where we start swaying into the demanding category is when children forget about relationships, or quite frankly, adults forget about relationships and are just pursuing the goals. That kid that wants to watch a certain video and will argue and badger and complain and maybe even bully their siblings into watching that video and not their video. The kid who wants to play this game and won't budge 1 inch in playing that game with their peers or siblings, because this is the game that we're going to play because I said so, right? That's demandingness. And we want to work on that, because what that kid's doing is saying, this is the most important thing and you are not as important. That's not how Jesus operates. So, how do we draw that kid back? How do we help that kid come back more closer to the center of ambition and contentment? Excuse me. A couple of things you could do. There are a couple of things that you can do. One, start working on gratitude development. You want to run a little school of gratitude at your house. That looks like simple things like during dinner time when you're eating together, going around the table and sharing things you're grateful for. If you don't eat dinner every night together, maybe it's at prayer time when you're putting your kid to bed. But pick a time in your day, attach this practice to something else you're already doing, and talk about the things you're thankful for. Gratitude development is also naturally embedded into our lives as adults. When we're being grateful, when we're saying thank you for things, when we're recognizing when others are stepping up and doing more than what's expected, we start seeing kids who recognize it as well, because more's caught than taught. When children just live in a family where gratitude's regular, they start being pretty grateful kids as well. But beyond just being very grateful, we need some strategies for in this moment. You see, this child is used to debating and arguing and badgering until he or she gets their way. And we need to stop that from happening so they start seeing those skill sets, arguing, debating, badgering. They start seeing those skill sets as negative for certain situations, that they don't get what they want when they do that. Oh, yes, we want them to still be good at articulating their thoughts, of debating ideas. Absolutely. And there's a forum and a place for that. But when mommy and daddy say something, that's likely not the place. Can't kids ever share their thoughts? Yeah, they can. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But in this situation, we have a kid whose heart is just too far in this category, and they don't know how to just accept an answer from a parent without debating it and arguing about it. So here's what you're going to do: a couple of things. One, you're going to start using more visual language with your kid, because what your kid's doing is trying to wear you down so that your child can get their way. Because again, they are pursuing a certain goal more than they are pursuing peace and harmony in relationships. And so our visual language is going to sound something like saying, "Hey, I know I've answered this question, but you keep asking. It's almost like you're a woodpecker just pecking away and I'm the tree." That's a very visual piece of language that helps a kid see, like, oh, that's what I'm doing. Okay. That starts to help. Now, that's not going to change the heart. We do need to practice gratitude, like I mentioned earlier, but it does paint a picture for your kid. But a second thing we need to do is we need to make sure that this is not effective, that our kid doesn't get to spend 15 minutes debating us and we finally go, okay, fine, just do whatever you're going to do. And the way we do that is we change our conversation. We stop debating the issue, we start discussing the process. Here's what I mean by that. Many times, this debate starts off very innocently, and we see it as very innocent. We tell our child they need to go to bed, and our kid says something like, "Oh, can I stay up for 10 more minutes?" An innocent question. Would have been nice for the kid to say, "Okay, mommy, okay, dad." Yeah, but there's nothing wrong with that. But then we go something like, "Well, no, we can't because, I know it's Saturday tomorrow, but grandma and grandpa are coming over and we need to clean up the house before they come," and you give your reasons. And then your kid comes back with, "Okay, but like my room's clean and my sister's room's clean and the playroom, we didn't even touch it today because we were out. So really it's just the living room and kitchen that we have to clean up. So we can certainly do that before they come because they don't come till lunch." And now you come back, and they said that respectfully, and you come back and you explain why that's not okay. "I know we just have to do those couple rooms, but I don't think you're remembering. I also need to get out. We need to get to the store because we have to buy something for lunch. Because remember, we ran out of blah blah." And you give your more reasons, and they say something. "Oh, okay, but don't you realize I could do this then?" And they're just going back and forth, and you're genuinely just answering. Somewhere in that process, about 5 minutes in, you all of a sudden go, what why am I debating with this kid? Like, this is a little kid. I said to go to bed, and I'm debating with them. And you start getting annoyed internally. Now, if you're like super parent, you're able to keep that there and change it out here and simply say something like, "I gave you an answer. You need to go to bed." But too many of us don't keep that internally, and we look at our kid and we get annoyed, and we're like, "Excuse me, I said no, and it's 10 minutes now and you just won't accept no. You need to get yourself to bed. Get to bed now. Forget about it." And you start raising your voice and yelling, right? This is how this goes. If this is how it goes for you, give me a thumbs up so I know I'm not the only one that this is how it goes for. This is how it goes. But that's not really effective. First of all, that's what we would call harshness. And harshness has no place in our parenting. Firmness does, harshness does not. Firmness is when we set a boundary and we stick to it. Harshness is when, excuse me, when we forget about the relationship and we allow emotion to drive the firmness. That's when harshness has come in. When our emotions start getting involved, we're being harsh now. So what do we do instead? When we give our kid an expectation, hey, it's time to go to bed, we expect them to say, okay, mom, okay, dad, and head off to bed. Now they come back with the, can I just stay up a few minutes later? And you give the answer like, no, grandma's coming. Okay. And now they start going back, and now the conversation starts. Before it goes any further, here's where you stop it. And you say, you know what? Let's call him Samantha. You know what, Samantha? I gave you an answer already, and you need to accept my answer. And she might come back a little bit more. And you're going to say something like, listen, Samantha, I gave you an answer already, and you're not accepting it. So even though I would love to say yes right now, your heart needs to learn how to hear no and be okay with it. So I have to say no at this point, because you need to understand when I set this type of boundary in place, it doesn't really matter all my reasons. It matters that I spoke this, and you're expected to follow it at that point. This is part of learning how to cooperate with your parents, because you're also learning how to cooperate with lots of people. And sometimes that means listening to the people who God's placed in charge. So you need to go to bed. And we need to stop the debate. If your kid keeps pushing it, you're going to look at your kid and say, Samantha, you're doing the wrong thing. You need to go to bed. When you make that type of a statement, you're doing the wrong thing, you are using conscience-bearing language. That phrase, you're doing the wrong thing, sits on the conscience in this one spot called dealing with wrongs. When you say you need to go to bed, that's another weight we put on their conscience that sits in this other spot called do what's right. These are 2 of 4 parts that the Bible talks about in the conscience. And if we're going to develop our child's conscience, we need to interact with those parts. Notice the tone of voice I'm using right now. This is the tone of voice you should be using with your child too at that point. We're not getting angry. We're not yelling. We're not screaming. We're just saying this is what's expected. Now, I told you beginning of this video that I would tell you about what about does my kid ever get to express their opinion or make a special request? Yes, they do. They certainly can. It's called a wise appeal. And that looks something like acknowledging the direction that was given and explaining the situation and making a request. So it is not asking why. Let's take the situation that we've just talked about, going to bed. You told your daughter, Samantha, to go to bed. Samantha says, okay, mom, but I'm right near the end of a show and it's going to end in 8 minutes. Can I stay up till the end of that video? Do you see what Samantha did here? She started with the words, okay, mom, which tells me as mom, she's trying to cooperate with me. Her intention is to cooperate. But then she also says, but I have a problem. This video has 8 minutes left on it, and I really want to finish it. She's explaining her problem. She's not whining, complaining. She's just explaining. And then she presents a request. May I stay up for the last 8 minutes and then go to bed? Your child says that to you. Very easy to say yes at that point. BJ, they have to get all the words right? Not exactly. I mean, do I want them to? Yeah, that'd be great. But this isn't about the words. It's about the heart. And so, yes, I want them to say something like, okay, mommy, okay, daddy, because that shows that they're cooperating. And I'm going to give them these very specific phrases, not because they have to be word perfect, but because these phrases are going to help them now and in the future. Think about being in a work environment and the boss tells you the whole team has to do something. And it's not a very popular thing, but boss said it, we got to do it. One of you in that team of coworkers goes into the boss's office and starts saying like, well, but can't we just do it this way? Because we've always done it that way. Wouldn't that be okay? And the boss says, nope, we expect it this way. Oh, but I don't think you're really being fair. It would be much better if we just, and it goes back and forth, and the voices start going higher and it starts getting more tense, that's not going to work. But you go into the boss's office and say, "Okay, boss, I know what you said about us having to do this, and I'll get that done for you. But here's the problem I'm having. You need these reports in by Thursday afternoon, but I don't get the email from the database system until Friday at 9 a.m. That's when it auto sends it to me. So my report's going to be incomplete every Thursday afternoon. Do you want me to send it incomplete and just update it afterwards? Or may I wait until Friday at 10 a.m.?" Do you see the difference there? That's what we're trying to help our kids with. This is not about, I'm holding this over you, kid, until you get the words perfect. No, it is about preparing a child for success in the future and now by training their heart and their behaviors how to make that work well for them and showing them this is going to be more successful for you. So when your child comes to you and whines about it and does it approaches you the wrong way, instead of just saying, "Nope, you didn't do it the right way, I have to say no." Well, that doesn't really show a really close relationship with your child. You're going to say, "Ooh, it sounds like you're trying to make a wise appeal. You meant to say, 'Okay, dad,' and then explain your problem and ask your question. Go ahead, try again and give your kid a second shot." And if they go with you on that ride and they give it a second shot and they do even half a decent job, and it's possible for you to say yes, say yes. Do you know what that's going to do for your relationship with your child? That's going to speak volumes to them and connect you deeper to them than you were when this first started. So go for it. Work with your kid. This child who's demanding is just that. They're a child who's being demanding. They're not a demanding child. They are a child who is acting demanding. We're trying to create a child who is more content, more shows more gratitude, and is able to balance that with ambition. You start doing that, and it's going to take a while, but you will see success. Thanks so much for your question. I appreciate it greatly. All right. So I had a question. I had an email come in. I'm not going to read this email. It's a bit too long, but it was a really thoughtful email. So I wrote a blog recently, and the blog was about this problem with parents that I see happening a lot. God likes to bring together people who are different in marriage. And a lot of times he brings together a parent who is a bit more firm and a parent who's a bit more relational. And they butt heads because firmness parent thinks relational parent is being too just walked all over. Relational parent thinks firmness parent is being too rude, too harsh, expects too much something. And at one point in the marriage and in the family, those two parents talked about it and it went wildly wrong and it went really bad. And so we don't talk about that anymore. Has that ever happened to you? And so they don't talk about it, but they parent in that knowledge. And so firmness parent feels the need to be even firmer and firmer and firmer. And relational parent, because of that, feels the need to be more relational, more relational, more relational. And what happens is they keep parenting further and further apart from each other to the point where firmness parent is being harsh and not firm anymore. And it's hurting the relationship. And relational parent is getting walked all over, maybe acting in some ways that are like codependent. And it's going really bad. They just, they're just a pushover at that point. And they're just sitting there looking at each other, nodding their heads, going, "See, I was right." So that's the dynamic I've seen. It's not everybody, but it's a lot. And a lot of times, many parents come and they say, "He's the one who's being too firm. She's the one being too relational." But it's not always that way. The blog I wrote set it up that way. I created a fictitious family that was sort of imagined based on a group of families I've seen. This scenario playing over and over and over again. But it's not always that way. Sometimes it's mom who's really firm, and dad's the one who's much more relational. So this email comes in that basically said, "BJ, thank you so much for what you wrote. I would really love for you, though, to rewrite this because I don't think you were specific enough, is how I took it. Practical enough, and we've got some people who really need to understand that harshness really damages things, and at the same time, that getting walked all over damages things. So I thought, let me just take that email, phrase it as a question, and talk about it tonight a little bit. I thought that might help me work through it a little bit, but also help you, since I think this person who emailed me is not alone. First of all, if you're watching and you're the person who emailed me, thank you so much. I appreciate that, that you reached out, and I could tell from your email you took a lot of time to put some thought and care into that, and you clearly read what I wrote, and I appreciate that too. Um, and those blogs are only about 800 words, so I can only say so much in those blogs. So hopefully this gives you a little bit more. And also in that blog, you might notice there's a link to a resource called Connected Cooperation. And I think based on your email, you would love that mini course. You can find it at jesushelpmeparent.com/connected cooperation. So I'm going to give you this answer, but before I do, I'm going to put a note in here for my son. So I recently started asking my son to edit these videos and chop them up and use them on social media. And I thought this would make a good little clip for a video. So I'm going to put a note in here for my son. Son, everything I just said now is just for the audience that's live. So don't include it. I'm about to start the video right here. So this is where you're going to clip it. Not when I'm rubbing my nose, though. All right. Oh, let me get this thing up right over here. Okay. If you're a parent who, sorry, I'm going to try that again since I know I'm taping it. Might as well try it again. All right, here we go. In your parenting journey, if you've ever had a situation with your spouse where you and your spouse disagree and you felt like one of you was being too firm and the other one a little too relational, and this became a pattern in your parenting, let me help you start ironing out those differences now so you can get on the same page. Many times in our relationships as parents, we discover that we parent a little differently than each other. And I don't want you to get to the end of this video and think, okay, I have to totally abandon what I'm doing and do what she's doing or what he's doing, or we have to do everything together exactly alike. No, God brought you two together for a reason, and you are different. So let's start using your differences to bless your kids rather than just get into arguments. At some point, likely in this relationship, you and your spouse had a conversation with each other, and you started talking about how, and you were genuinely trying to fix a problem. And one of you started talking about how it feels like the kids are walking all over you, or it feels like you don't even care about them, like you're a little too harsh with them. And genuinely, whoever brought it up was really trying to help the situation. And likely the other person didn't hear it that way. If you can relate to that, give a thumbs up right here. Give me a comment down below. And so we got into a fight. It went ugly. We forgave each other later on, but we learned a lesson. We don't talk about that anymore. And instead, the one parent who is trying to be firm is watching relational parent. And because it's not going well, because they keep seeing that parent get walked all over, they feel like they need to be firmer and firmer and firmer and firmer. And relational parent sees that and they know not to talk about it. So they feel the need when they have to discipline to be even more relational, more relational, more relational, more related. And so we're worlds apart from each other. And the danger becomes when firmness parent switches into harshness parent. And when relational parent moves into either manipulative parent or walkover parent. And we have trouble now. We need to get ourselves back here. What does these look like and how do we do that? So let's take the firmness side of things. People don't want to hear this oftentimes, but our kids need firmness. Firmness, though, is not harshness. Firmness is when we establish some boundaries and we back them up. We do this all the time. We've all seen a stop sign in our town that we always stop at perfectly because there have been some police officers around the corner watching that stop sign in the past. And so we're careful. And we all have a stop sign in our town that everybody blows through because the police never park their cars over there. No, I'm not telling you to police your kids. No, that's not the right way to enter into that relationship. What I am saying is, in that analogy, those police officers are holding a firm boundary in one situation and no boundary in the other one. So we want to be firm about things. If we say something, we mean that. And we hold that to be true. What changes, though, is when we get harsh. Harshness is firmness plus my emotions, and it gets really ugly really fast. Harshness is firmness plus emotions that are out of control. And when they're out of control, I'm getting disconnected from my kids. You've heard me say, even when we're correcting, we're still connecting. That has to be true in our parenting, or things are going to go the wrong way. When we find ourselves, I'm going to give you a couple like warning signs, little like red flags that if I'm doing this, it's usually a sign that I am moving into the harshness zone. So you repeat yourself louder and with more intensity. Harshness zone. Your child obeys, but they look a little scared, or they're resentful, or they just shut down. That tells you crossed that line in that case too. Maybe you rely on punishments or threats to get anything done. And you're like, well, he did it. That's all that matters. That's not all that matters. Or you start withdrawing in relationship when your child disobeys. I don't want to see you right now. Get out of my sight. Ugh. Right? Like, that's harshness now. Or you start talking about power struggles with your kid and this feeling like you got to win every battle. When we're talking about power struggles and battles, we're having the wrong conversation. Or you start thinking, if my child does not instantly obey, then clearly they're disobeying. We got to fix that. No, instant obedience is not what we're looking for. And I've used that phrase, not instant obedience. I've said things like, when you obey, you want to do it instant, complete, and cheerful. But I've always defined instant as, now, not jump up, go right next second, but saying something like, okay, dad, okay, mom, and going and doing it. That's instant. But unfortunately, I'm finding that phrase is turning into something I don't mean. I'm changing my language around that to start talking about when we want to work on cooperation with kids, we want to see them cooperate wholeheartedly, and with willingness and with trust. Those are things we want to see when we're working with our kids. And so that's sort of the language I've been migrating more towards. But what I've been trying to communicate hasn't changed. It's just the language that I feel connects better with where our culture's at right now, which is not hearing it the way it's intended. So when you're doing those things, repeating yourself louder, expecting, seeing your child obey but get fearful, resentful, or shut down, you're relying on punishments and threats. You have to win every battle. You expect them to jump at the drop of a hat. Like, that's when you're crossing over into this harshness territory where you need to pull back. Now, the flip side, this is the parent who is relational and they want to meet their child where they're at and they want to help their child grow in cooperation. That's a good thing. But it's not working. And they're seeing this harshness over here and they feel the need to go even further over there. So how do I know when I'm not just being relational, but I'm actually either getting walked all over, or I'm just doing this to manipulate my kid into doing what I say? What's that look like when I've crossed that line? Well, first of all, you often avoid saying no. You don't want your child to be upset. You're walking on eggshells. When you start feeling like, I don't know how she's going to react, I don't know what he's going to do if I say no. Yep, that's a sign that you're going too far there. Or if your child pushes back on you and you just give in all the time, that you never use no because you're just giving in just to keep the peace, that's a sign that you're crossing too far. Or if you feel like you have to explain and explain and explain what they should be doing, and you're talking about boundaries, but you're never enforcing boundaries, that's a sign that you're going too far that way. Excuse me. Or you feel guilty when your child's disappointed. You see your child being disappointed, and you're like, oh gosh, he's upset now. Maybe I shouldn't have. Oh, what's he gonna feel later on? On the flip side, I will say the parents who's being too harsh sometimes looks at disappointment and says, good, he should feel that way. Whoa, both of those are going the too extreme. Or your child's mood is dictating the atmosphere in your home. Or you're just confusing connection with permissiveness. And everything just goes. When those are the things that describe your parenting a little bit more, yeah, you're venturing into being too far on that side as well. And guess what? I know classically when we talk about these things, we always think this is dad, this is mom. But the truth is, I've seen it the other way too. I've seen it both ways with lots of families. So what do we do instead? Well, a couple of things. One, we need to start understanding the importance of connection with our kids. I was just listening to some information just yesterday where they talked about all the things we do to set our kids up for success in life. We get them tutors. We take them to we give them music classes so that their brains develop, and we put them in a chess club so they can develop their critical thinking skills. We give them flashcards and lots of things to help them be a success. Guess what they find is the biggest impactor on success? Whether or not that child feels deeply known and valued and connected to you. That outbeats, if that's a word, everything else that I listed out there. There's nothing else that comes even close than a child who is connected to their parents. And so this idea of connection is vital. There's three things every kid needs: connection, self-regulation, and felt safety. We can work on all three, but when we're working on connection, we're affecting the other two in a positive way. When our kid feels connected, they also can regulate a lot more easily. When our kid feels connected, they also have felt safety a whole lot more. And so we have to work on connection. We need to make our relationships with our children the priority, not the activities they're going to do, not the places we're going to take them, not the money we're going to spend on them. No, it's the time we invest in those relationships and being very intentional. And the good news is it doesn't take a whole lot to see a lot of impact. It doesn't take days and days and days of daddy-daughter dates, mommy-son dates, and everything else to do this. It doesn't mean you got to have dinner every single night. You've seen the studies about families have dinner together. And yes, have dinner together. Obviously, the studies are true. But, oh, gosh, we missed a dinner tonight. Okay, that's going to happen, right? It's consistency going in the right direction. But when you come home from work, could you take 5 or 10 minutes and get on the floor and play with your kid for a few minutes there? Or sit down on the couch and just talk to them about their day? Or notice them playing the video game they're playing and just watch them play it for a few minutes and then tell them how awesome they seem to be at playing that game? Could you do that for a few minutes? Or the next time you're running out to the store, could you look back at one of your kids and say, hey, hop in a car with me. I'm going to the store. Why don't you come with me? And just go together. And it doesn't have to be that you're buying them something. If you did, that's not bad either. But it doesn't have to be that. It's just time together, laughing, joking, investing in each other. We around our house, so we do dinner together every night. And every now and then we got a kid going to youth group or a Bible study or something like that. But we try to do dinner every single night. And our kids help us prepare that meal. Not all of them at one time. We're not superhero parents around here, but everybody has a night they do dinner. And I just did dinner tonight. I'm not on the rotation. I do dinner, right? But one of my daughters was there, and we were standing there about this close to each other, slicing up a bunch of tomatoes. And we just started talking about her day and what she did today. And it was just a moment we had. Those are the moments that help us connect. That connection is going to help us in the discipline moments as well. We're not connecting to manipulate that discipline time. We're connecting because they're our kids and we love them. But we also recognize there's going to be benefits in these moments when we have to work with a kid who's getting off track in their behavior to help them get back on track. And so that's the first thing. And if this connection thing is sounding good to you, you're going to want a resource that I put in a blog, and I've put it in a couple of different places. I'll put it in the links down below. You go to JesusHelpMeParent.com/connected cooperation. It's all about how to get your family on the same page, how to start working together as a family and cooperating. And what do we do when it doesn't work? How do we, yes, stay connected even when we're correcting? Go JesusHelpMeParent.com/connected cooperation. You'll be so glad that you jumped into that mini course. It's super simple, just a couple modules, uh, all video based and also audio based. If you're somebody who likes to plug things into your ears and just listen, I made an audio version of it as well. Super affordable. Go check it out at the website. You'll love it. But we need to help our kids with this. And in those moments, how do we balance out firmness and relationship? Well, it often starts in the moment when our kids are exploding with emotions, when they're yelling back at us, when they're doing those things. Instead of getting personally offended, angry ourselves, and yelling back at our kids, offering them a chance to redo that interaction. Whoa, 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 whoa. You're really sounding angry. Why don't you try that again with respect? That's being firm. You're not yelling, you're not screaming, you're just saying, we're not going to talk to each other that way. Try it again for me with respect. Now your kid digs your heels even further, yells even louder. Now you're going to switch what you're doing because your words aren't working. This kid needs to, calm down, take a break, settle down so we can talk. And for some kids, you could just say, you know what? I want to talk to you and help you out. This isn't working. Why don't you have a seat right here? When you're ready, come see me. For some kids, that works beautifully. And it's great when that works. For other kids, that's not going to work. They're going to feel distance from us. They're going to explode even louder, but this isn't going to work. Okay, we still need the same idea, but we need us involved more. That's where I start telling families how to use what I call CALM. CALM, CALM. It stands for connect, attune, lean, and map. And I teach this to lots of families about, in that moment, that kid's getting louder. Instead of you getting louder and trying to overpower, coming in, making eye contact, connecting with that kid and saying, wow, this is really tough for you right now, isn't it? Or wow, you're really upset about this, aren't you? And genuinely meaning that. Like, you're not saying it's okay for you to explode on me. You're not saying this is a totally acceptable response you have right now. You're just acknowledging the behavior in the moment. Excuse me, the emotion in the moment. And you're saying, wow, this is really hard for you, isn't it? And what's going to happen in that moment is your kid either is going to feel totally seen and say, yes, it is. Or they're going to say, no, I'm not angry right now. I'm just really frustrated about this. Oh, okay. Or they're going to say, yes, I am. And they're going to go on and on and on. And they're going to talk a little bit more. What's that mean? They're giving you data. They're giving you information, and they're not going down into their lower brain, into their amygdala, into fight, flight, freeze. They're staying up in that rational part of their brain, or they're kind of close up there, right? They're in there more because they're using their verbal skills. Still not okay. Still okay. But we're not talking about that right now. I'm just acknowledging your emotion right now. And in that moment, when I acknowledge your emotion in that moment, you start feeling seen. That's how we stay connected. And now we need to attune. CA. Attune means we need to use some strategies to calm down. That might look like deep breathing. That might look like a cleansing breath. That might look like getting a drink of water together. That might look like sitting down and me rubbing your back for a minute. That might look like you sitting in the little tent in your room and listening to some calm music for 5 minutes and coming back and talking to me. Whatever it is, we need to figure out what those strategies are that work for our kids. But when we find the ones that work, those are the ones we use until our child has, yes, calmed down. And if our child's not calming down, it usually means we need to go back to connect. And we need to connect deeper and then go back to attuning. But we're going to get this attuning right until this kid's settled. And now we have to push forward. And this is where, let me just stop here at C and A. C and A are often easier for the relational parent to do. They like C and A, connect and attune. And the parent who is more firm struggles with C and A because it's not as natural. That parent, I need you to trust me on this and do that. But now I'm about to cross over into L and M, lean and map. And this is where firmness parent feels a lot better, and relational parent really struggles with this part because it's not as natural. I need you to trust me on this ride and go all the way over. So lean means lean on God's truths, and map means map a plan forward. And this is a simple conversation we need to have with this kid. It sounds something like a couple of different ways. I'm going to give you two ways it can sound. It can sound something like, so I'm glad we were able to calm down here. Let's think about what did you do wrong here? Yeah, you screamed and yelled at mommy, or you refused to do what I said, whatever the kid did wrong. Why is that wrong? And what you're trying to do there is you're just trying to help your kids see there's a connection here to God's truth. Like, it was really disrespectful to speak that way because God wants you to listen to your parents. Yeah, it was disrespectful. It was disobedient. It was unsafe, but somehow related to some truth. And it doesn't have to be a Bible verse. We're not trying to beat our kids over the head with a Bible verse. No, it's not wrong for you to have a Bible verse in there, but you don't have to. But here's where we start mapping the last question. Okay, so what are you going to do differently next time? What's the plan? Your kid's likely going to say, not do it, right? And they're going to say something like that, or they're going to say, I don't know. That's okay. You're going to give them a plan. And this is critical, because this is likely a situation that repeats itself a lot in family life, and our kids need a plan to move forward. Are they going to execute this plan perfectly next time? Probably not. They're probably going to mess it up a little bit. Don't worry, we'll be back here. We'll keep going over the plan. You're your child's best coach. Your child is the player on the team. Coaches coach their players and teach them when the opposite team, which is the flesh, the sin nature, whatever you want to call it here, when that opposite team is throwing up some really challenging moves against you and you keep losing, coach has a plan. Think about what your child needs to say differently and do differently. That starts to give you an idea of what the plan might look like. Or just ask yourself, okay, if my kid was to go back and redo that thing that they just really messed up here, what would it look like if they did it right? That'll help you know how to coach your kid. So, what went wrong? What did you do wrong? Why was it wrong? What's your plan for next time? Uh, Sometimes we have to ask kids, okay, what are you going to do now to fix this? Like if they need to apologize or clean up a mess they made because they threw like the board game or something like that. But once we've gotten there, we need to tell our kids, okay, you've got a plan. I'm really proud of you for working through this. You're free to go. Go try again. Our kids need to know we genuinely believe in them and want them to try again in that situation, because we want to see them be successful. So that's one way the conversation goes. Sometimes, excuse me, the conversation is a little bit different. And we might say, if a child is really anxious about something or worried about something, we might pull in a piece of scripture and say, I hear what you're saying. And we've calmed down now. We don't say it when the kid's still anxious. We've calmed down. I see how worried you were about this situation. And it made me think about how God's word says this. And so let's make a plan based on that. Or I see how frustrated and angry you got in this situation. And you know what? I think I know why you're getting angry, because you know that God's word says this. And that situation wasn't like that. Your brother was being dishonest with you, and you know God's word says this. So let's make a plan based on that. So that's sometimes how the conversation goes too. I tend to use the first one, but the second one works very well also. So if these two parents, firmness parent, relational parent, start doing calm, CALM, connect, attune, lean, and map, they're going to stretch themselves both. One with the C and A, the other one with the L and M. But in the process, what they're doing is they're looking to reach the heart of that kid. And you do this enough times over and over and over again, you're going to reach the heart of that child. That child will change, because you know who's even more invested in heart change than you or your child? Jesus is. Jesus wants to see that heart change in your child and in both of you. And this approach starts to help you get on the same page as well. You start doing that, and suddenly the fears about the parent who's too harsh start dissipating. The fears about the parent who's just getting walked all over start dissipating. The fears of having those conversations that went really bad when we first started having them start to go away, because we realize we're all on the same team in family life. And we're all just trying to grow a little closer to Jesus together. You start doing that, you'll be so glad that you did. All right. So that's probably what I would have put into that blog that I mentioned. That if I had more than 800 words, that would help flesh that out a little bit. So again, if you're that person who sent me that email, thank you so much. And hopefully this video gets to you and helps flesh that blog out a little bit more. Because you're right, we need to have some really practical examples of what does it look like when we're getting too harsh. What does it look like when we're getting walked all over, or we're just doing things to manipulate a kid into doing the things we want them to do the way we want them to do. That's not healthy at all. And again, if you hear me now, great. If you're watching this on the replay, head over to jesushelpmeparent.com/connected cooperation. You're going to find over there a really simple parenting mini course, super affordable, super simple. It's just a bunch of videos with me, but I'm going to show you, how do I build connection with my kids? How do we cooperate as a family? And what do we do when it doesn't work? What do we do when kids get off track? How do I stay connected to my child even when I'm trying to correct them in the moment? It is possible. And I also put in that little course, what do we do to adapt this to kids with special needs? What do we do to adapt this to kids with big emotions, kids who come from traumatic backgrounds, all kinds of situations I put in the final module. So go check it out. You'll be so glad you did. I am looking at the clock and realizing I've got to go. My time's up, and I've got a family waiting for me to coach them. So thank you so much. If you just joined me now, hit the thumbs up button if you're enjoying what you're hearing, and maybe go back and watch the replay as well. And meet me back here next Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm on here each week doing live Q&A. I often have, and if you have a question and you'd like me to answer it, click that link. And down in the description, I put a link. Click on it, put your question in that little Google form, and I'll answer it on the next Raw Parenting Unfiltered. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. I'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.